Death Mage, 199 hard mode in both worlds. The house of the leader of the Bravers, the house of the Amia couple, was in a high-end residential area. Naturally, it was a safe area, with surveillance cameras and top-of-the-line guard golems, similar to Earth's drones. It wasn't rare for houses here to have their own hired security personnel, those with military experience. It was said that the only ones who would try to rob a house in this area were those who wanted to end up in a prison or in a coffin. Banda was traveling the streets of this residential area, in the middle of the day, facing backwards. He did not possess a physical form, so it appeared as if he were sliding silently across the ground, as if someone were pulling him along.
This is the nation of Japan, the equivalent to Earth's Japan. Even though this is supposed to be a fantasy-like world where magic exists, it looks just like a world featured in a near-future science fiction film.
He thought to himself as he looked at the security golems with cameras attached to their heads and golem trucks that drove themselves automatically to deliver their goods. If the golems were replaced by robots, it would truly be a science fiction world. Since machines were also being used, it could have been described as a hybrid between magic and science. Considering that, Banda thought that it might have made more sense to simply use actual robots, but unfortunately, the word robot was not a commonly known term in origin. It was a technical jargon term used to refer to rare golems that did not require magic to operate. Perhaps technology has developed further because of magic's existence, Banda thought. Leaving these differences between the worlds aside, it seems my main body really is Mechun. Banda appeared as if he was sliding backwards without moving his legs, or at least he would, if he was visible to anyone other than May. But he was actually not moving of his own will at all. He was being dragged along as Amemiya Narumi pushed the stroller that May was riding in, approximately 50 meters behind him. It didn't seem that Narumi felt any resistance, so Banda had tried planting his feet in the ground, but even when he did so with all his strength, it had been impossible to stay in place. It was likely that even using materialization and digging his claws into the ground would have no effect.
Now then, I've tested the maximum distance between me and Mechun, and whether the golem's mana sensors can detect me, so now all that's left is...
Banda opened his mouth, whose corners were at his ears. He extended his tongue and his two antennae, which were ordinarily covered by his hair. He saw that he could extend both of these over 10 meters ahead of him. Next, he slightly opened the membrane that looked like a coat and fired a horn of the Demon King, using the Demon King's lungs and proboscis like an air gun. The horn flew into the distance. Of course, it was a spiritual projectile with no physical form, so it didn't collide with anything.
I can't be more than 50 meters away from Mechun by myself, but my tongue and antennae can extend beyond that, and I can fire parts of myself that are separated from my body. That probably applies for my spells too.
Banda murmured to himself.
Now then, I suppose it's time to go back.
Banda turned around and returned to Mechun and the other Banda that was there with her. He moved incredibly quickly, even catching up to the car that was moving in front of him.
How am I so fast? Do the original's attribute values apply in this world?
He wondered.
I'm back, Mechun me.
Banda,
May said happily inside the stroller.
Welcome back, me.
Said the Banda that had stayed with her.
Now then, let's return back to normal.
Banda was a being that existed only in spirit. He had made use of that to make a clone of himself. Now, the two Bandas merged back into one.
Banda,
Mechun, it's not that we got rid of one of me, we just returned back to normal.
Banda told her. May was currently being taken to the park by Amiya Narumi and the woman who worked for her as a babysitter and helper. Incidentally, her older brother Hiroshi was currently playing at his friend's house.
Mistress, do you know what this Banda that Mei-chan has been saying since this morning could be?
Asked the helper.
I don't really know.
Narumi replied.
I think she means panda, but...
May made a noise of discontent.
Mekun, I can't hug you when outsiders, when mom and others are around.
Said Banda.
It'd frighten them.
He felt uncomfortable calling Amia Narumi Mom, but he did his best to not show any reservation when it came to her parents. He needed to get used to it, but less than a day had passed since he had begun haunting May.
Then perhaps Mei-chan can see a panda. It seemed that she saw a puppy the other day, after all.
Said the helper.
Yes, people say that children see things differently from adults, and things like this have happened with May before.
Said Narumi. It seemed that their suspicions were resolved. Banda was thankful that they were not more concerned. After a little while, they arrived at the park. It seemed that playground equipment like slides and jungle gyms weren't very different between Earth and Origin. But May was still just a year old. She could not play on this equipment. She would spend most of the time having a nap, while Narumi and her babysitter discussed child-raising strategies with Narumi's friends and their babysitters.
My son's such a rascal, his body can't keep up with his antics. Boys are a lot of work, aren't they? But our Hiroshi is so focused on games.
Speaking of games, I've heard that there are games that need you to go outside to play them.
How peaceful. Maybe Dark Demon Creation Path Enticement isn't in effect because I'm not the main vandal you. Spirits don't really come near me.
Banda murmured to himself.
Puppy Tilda.
Said May.
Mekun, that's the spirit of a puppy. It doesn't have a good aura around it, so it might be dangerous if you call out to it.
Banda warned her as he looked at Narumi's face and casually thrust his arm into one of the housewives that she was talking to.
That's strange, am I getting tired?
The housewife gave a small groan. Banda moved his arm to feel around her insides.
I'm already entirely made of spirit form, so nothing out of the ordinary. Next, nerve inflammation, I'll give you some medicine for that. Next, severe stiffness in the shoulders. I'll fix that, so take care.
Banda said to her. One after another, he thrust his arm into the housewives and conducted a medical examination on them. He then put his tongue into them and used materialization on a small part of it so that he could release the appropriate medicines on their unhealthy areas. The housewives let out small groans, suddenly experienced less back pain, and one even squirmed and moaned, "My shitty ears." Meanwhile, Banda carefully observed Narumi's reaction.
Everyone, are you all right?
Narumi asked the housewives. It seemed that she really had not taken any notice of Banda's actions.
Even at this distance, I won't be noticed as long as I don't use magic. Well then, I suppose it's fine for me to use my skills and the power of the fragments.
Banda concluded. The parasite-type Demon King familiar, which used the Demon King's subbrain and nerves to take over the bodies of others, had large limits on what skills it was capable of using. However, Banda was a being that had been created from a piece of Vandalu's own soul. Thus, it was likely that he would be able to use just about any skill if he used Materialize on himself.
I'm not sure if I can use my unique skills though. But it would be going too far to brainwash people or devour their souls to test that.
Banda said to himself.
Banda Mama okay?
May mumbled.
What about me, mate?
Said Narumi.
I'm not going to thrust my arm or tongue in Mom unless she really needs emergency medical treatment.
Said Banda.
She might take notice of me too.
That was when it happened. The ominous dog Spirit snarled, suddenly leaping up and biting one of the children on the jungle gym. This was a peaceful, high-class residential area, but spirits could not be managed. However, this dog was far short of being an actual evil spirit, the kind that would appear before the living as ghosts and curse them or materialize to bite them. The bitten child was unharmed. His foot had just slipped a little. However, the bite had come at an unlucky moment. The boy had been climbing the jungle gym, and his foot slipping made him almost fall off. At the same time, he desperately tried to twist around to grab onto the jungle gym, but he lost his balance. And with a startled shout, he fell, with the back of his head pointed towards the ground. All of this took place within a handful of seconds. Naturally, there was no way that the child's mother or Narumi would save him in time. However, the jungle gym was not that high off the ground. Being a child who didn't weigh much, even if the back of his head struck the ground, perhaps he would get away with just a bump on his head. But during those few seconds, Banda chased the dog spirit away, produced fat and soft fur on his hand, and placed his hand between the child's head and the ground. The moment the child's head landed, he used materialize on the surface of his hand.
In the worst-case scenario, he could die.
He murmured to himself. Noticing that something was wrong, the boy's mother came running to the scene. The boy was confused at soft sensation on his head and the lack of pain. The mother scooped him into her arms and checked whether he was injured.
Banda Tilda,
Said May, happily greeting Banda as he returned.
It looks like he didn't hit his head too badly. I'm glad he's not hurt.
Said Narumi.
Yes, I'm so glad.
Said the boy's mother.
It really seems that Amiya Narumi won't notice me if I'm just using the fragments.
Banda murmured. May was Banda's top priority. On top of that, he had to conceal his existence from everyone other than May. He wasn't here to save lives or carry out justice. But that couldn't mean that he could just do nothing and let everyone other than May die.
With great power comes great responsibility. I hate that way of thinking, and I don't intend to teach it to Mekun. But it would also be problematic to let her see me do nothing even though I have the ability to save people. That might greatly inhibit the development of her social morals, emotions, and the ability to feel empathy for others.
Banda told himself. He didn't want May to become a gentle philanthropist, but if possible, he wanted her to grow up to be a bright, considerate girl. Though this was also because Banda had the same personality as Vandalyu, who would have hesitated to simply let the boy fall.
And it's quite likely that my existence will be found out within a few years anyway.
Banda sighed, looking at May's mother, Amiya Narumi, the reincarnated individual with the angel ability that allowed her to mentally connect to others and share their memories and experiences. Vandalyu had heard of her ability from Kanako and the others. If she were to use it on May, Banda's existence would be revealed in an instant. Narumi wasn't likely to use it on her own daughter for no reason, but she would likely use it once she became curious enough about the mysterious friend that only her daughter could see. It was possible that it wouldn't come to that, but the people around May were sure to notice her peculiarity.
puppy,
May asked,
It's all right. I scared the bad puppy away, so it ran off somewhere.
Said Banda. May possessed an affinity for the death attribute and could even see spiritual beings. Perhaps because she had absorbed Pluto's power as a fetus, May had an affinity for the death attribute, something that no other person in origin possessed. Even Banda did not know why that was, but that was the reality. He didn't even know how much of an affinity for the death attribute May possessed. Would she only be able to use a single specific ability like Pluto and the others, or would she acquire death attribute charm and learn multiple spells like Vandalyu? But if this was to become known, the whole world would turn its attention to her. She was the daughter of the braver Amiya Hiroto and the angel Narumi, so it was likely that she wouldn't be taken into captivity right away. But the Avalon Rikudo Hijiri was trying to get his hands on the death attribute, and he would not stay quiet. Depending on the trouble that arose from those circumstances, Banda's existence would be found out after all.
Hey, me, it's not like I'm resenting you, but the situation is pretty hard over here.
Banda murmured, wishing his words would reach Vandalyu.
Banda Tilda,
Said May.
By the way, Mekun, wouldn't it be better for me to call you Mei-chan instead of Mekun?
Banda asked her. May made an unhappy noise, tears welling up in her eyes.
What's the matter, May? You look like you're about to cry. Are you hungry? Sleepy?
Asked Narumi.
All right, I'll keep calling you Mekun. Look, it's my antennae.
Said Banda, waving his antennae at her to cheer her up again. Several years had passed since Machida Aran, Shimada Izumi, and Endo Koya became Rodcourt's familiar spirits, in other words, angels. They had become able to perform some of the maintenance work on the Circle of Reincarnation system. They couldn't make any real adjustments to it, but they could resolve its errors.
That was all,
It seems that it's finally settled down.
Said Izumi.
To think that errors would occur in origin, was there some kind of mass spawning of undead or something?
Aaron sighed. Thanks to the familiar spirits, the sudden errors occurring in the Circle of Transmigration system had been resolved.
A mass spawning of undead would be a large incident, but that doesn't seem to have happened. I checked Rikudu's memories, but it doesn't seem that he's run any large death attribute experiment.
Said Kuya.
Then what in the world happened? Vandalyu isn't in origin, you know.
Said Izumi. The cause of critical errors and bugs in the Circle of Transmigration system was Vandalyu. The familiar spirits were as aware of this as Rodcourt was. Rodcourt's system was generally near perfect, and with regular maintenance, no errors or bugs other than those caused by Vandalyu occurred in the system.
You're right. Even he wouldn't be able to fly from world to world.
Aaron murmured.
I take that back. Hey, take a look at Joseph's memories.
Is there something strange about them? You're right that his recovery from his insomnia and hallucinations is quite a big deal.
Said Kuya.
No, it's his dreams. Look at the records of his dreams.
Dreams.
The records of people's memories that could be seen through Rodcourt's Circle of Transmigration system also included the memories of dreams. However, dreams were unstable and often nonsense. Rodcourt certainly never looked at them, and the familiar spirits didn't look at them either. But now, Izumi and Kuya looked at the record that Aaron had told them to and froze. They were at a loss for words. There was one particularly clear, distinct record in Joseph's dreams, so clear that small details could be made out. This record contained a giant person made of countless human bodies and fragments of the Demon King. Kuya and Izumi managed to restart their brains after the initial shock and set about trying to analyze the grotesque giant.
What is this?
Kuya murmured.
Considering its appearance, it's kind of.
It looks like it's being very kind to Joseph.
Said Izumi.
These high-pitched screeches, are they words?
It was not that Joseph had experienced some terrible nightmare. Given that, this giant's presence was very strange. None of the familiar spirits immediately realized that the giant was Vandalyu. This applied for Rodcourt as well, but the familiar spirits were always watching the records from when people were awake, not at their dreams. However, through several rounds of reasoning and deduction, they became more and more certain that there was no other possibility.
It's probably Vandalyu. I checked the records from the victims being used in Rikudu's experiments, and they had the same dream on the same night as Joseph. The same goes for Metamorph.
Said Aaron.
This is Vandalyu.
Muttered Izumi.
Before he was reincarnated in Lambda, I heard that he had the same appearance as any other human other than the fact that he was covered in death attribute mana. But wait, the errors that we've been having, are they caused by the souls of Joseph and the others being guided?
She said, shocked by the idea of this possibility.
No, they haven't been guided yet.
Said Kuya.
If Joseph and the others had been guided, we wouldn't have been able to see their records, so that hasn't happened yet. It's likely that several instances of contact will be needed, like with Kanako and the others. So unless the same thing happens again next time, they'll stay inside Rodcourt's Circle of Transmigration system.
Next time,
Aaron muttered. There would certainly be a next time. Kuya and Aaron were certain of that. Vandalyu had appeared in the dreams of people in another world. As long as there was no way to prevent that from happening, it was highly likely that Vandalyu would appear in the dreams of Joseph, Mari, and the others again. Knowing this didn't mean that the familiar spirits could do anything about it, and Aaron couldn't help but give a self-deprecating smile, knowing that Joseph and Mari, especially Mari, would be better off being guided. He even wished that Vandalyu would keep appearing in their dreams every night.
Wait, if that's the case, why are there errors? Joseph and the others have received Vandalyu's influence, but if they haven't been guided, then there shouldn't be any errors.
Izumi pointed out. The self-deprecating smile vanished from Aaron's face in an instant.
You're right. Maybe there are some who have been guided.
It's not one of the reincarnated individuals. I've already checked that I can see everyone's records. Maybe some of Pluto's fans.
Kuya suggested.
Rodcourt wasn't paying attention to those either, so we don't even know how many there are. I'll check now,
Said Izumi. The familiar spirits used the system to investigate, but they found that they were able to check the records from every single person who worshipped the eighth guidance. So then, who had been guided? Having no leads, the familiar spirits looked through the records of Joseph and the others once more. Finally, they got to the metamorph Shihoin Marty's dream.
Isn't Vandalyu talking to someone, this black thing?
Said Kuya.
Is this a child could it be?
Said Aaron, hastily trying to access a certain record, but found that he couldn't, and knew that his hunch was correct.
Kuya Izumi, I've figured out who has been guided. It's Amiya and Narumi's daughter, May.
He said.
So it's her, you're right, we can't access her records.
Said Kuya.
to think that it's her. I didn't think to check.
Said Izumi. Among those living in Origin, the familiar spirits had frequently kept an eye on the other reincarnated individuals, those around them, and those who worshipped the eighth guidance. They had never checked May's records. May was also related to the reincarnated individuals, as she was Amiya Hiroto and Narumi's child, but she was just 1 year old. It would be far easier to get information by looking at the records of the Amiya couple or their babysitter, rather than May herself.
I'm sure he's not doing it on purpose, but what will we do? That bastard Rodcourt probably hasn't noticed.
Said Kuya.
He's in the middle of discussions. After all, Aaron, do you think Rodcourt will take notice when he gets back?
Izumi asked.
No, he probably won't unless we tell him.
Said Aaron.
We've already fixed the errors, and the one who was guided wasn't a reincarnated individual, but one of their daughters. He should have no interest in it.
The abilities that reincarnated individuals possessed came from the power in their souls. They weren't inherited by their children through blood. Their physical abilities were hereditary, and people's affinities for attributes in origin did not match those of their parents. But it was common knowledge that qualities for magic were passed on from generation to generation. But physical abilities and talent for magic were not important to Rodcourt. What Rodcourt believed was important were their powers. Indeed, there were people in both Origin and Lambda who possessed greater physical abilities and skill at magic than the reincarnated individuals. The Thunderclap, Schneider, and Randolph, the True, were good examples of this. It was possible that May and Hiroshi would inherit exceptional qualities from their parents, but Rodcourt wasn't interested in them.
Then let's keep quiet about it. He'll find out if he looks in detail at our own records, though.
Said Izumi.
He doesn't have the time for that, does he?
Said Aaron.
He might not even notice until Joseph is guided.
Rodcourt would offer the reincarnated individuals to Alda as anti-Vandalyu forces. In order to make that happen, it was certain that he was going to use some method to make the reincarnated individuals obey him. Perhaps he would erase the memories of the reincarnated individuals who refused, putting them into a convenient state where they couldn't remember anything but their own names, but could still use their fighting skills and abilities, and have them reincarnated in churches of Alda. And as they would be reincarnated in adult bodies, the head figures of Alda's religion would welcome them as champions. Rodcourt would certainly take steps to make methods like this available. Rodcourt alone wasn't skilled enough to remove a person's memories while leaving their experiences and skills intact. However, with the help of the gods of Alda's forces, this could become possible. As long as the reincarnated individuals remained in Rodcourt's circle of transmigration system, that is.
It would actually be helpful if he could guide everyone, though it's rather shameless for us to say that now.
Said Izumi.
We're on the side that wants to kill him after all. Not to mention that Rikudu and Amiya definitely won't be guided.
Said Aaron.
In any case, let's focus on deepening our understanding on the system for now.
Said Izumi.
If we're too focused on Amiya, Rodcourt could take notice.
While Banda was busy in Origin comforting Mei-chan with his antennae, in Lambda, Vandalyu was following the advice of the young beast person guard Kest and getting a room at the Starling Inn. The Starling Inn was an inn that was mainly used by novice adventurers, new peddlers, and inexperienced minstrels. Its selling point was that it was priced the same as a cheap lodging house in an alleyway, while offering relatively clean rooms as well as a breakfast of a hard lump of bread and a cup of water. The large rooms were 10 baums a night. It was the same price as the amount that Vandalyu had given to the corrupt guard Agar as a bribe.
Why do I feel like I've been ripped off?
Said Vandalyu.
Will you use him as fertilizer after all?
Said Aizen's voice in his ear.
It was just my imagination, I haven't been ripped off at all.
Vandalyu muttered quietly, putting down his belongings that he had made just for appearance's sake. He was in a large room that multiple guests used together, but it was still the middle of the day, so nobody other than Vandalyu was here. No, there was a man who appeared to be a minstrel, sleeping while clutching the case that held his instrument.
Even if this is what the guard recommended, you could have stayed in a nicer place, couldn't you? This big room would be completely filled up if I spread my legs out.
Said Orbia, who was now a ghost but had originally been a Scylla.
Well, your legs are long and you have 8 of them, Orbia-san, but the ceiling is very low in here.
Said Princess Levia, who had originally been a Titan.
Of course, I didn't choose this place because the guard recommended it to me. I booked the room just in case so that I'm not mistaken for a street urchin.
Said Vandalyu. This inn was such cheap accommodation that a poor child like him could stay here without raising suspicions.
It's a temporary base of operations to use while I prepare to register to the Commerce Guild, just until I can rent a house.
Vandalyu said. Vandalyu had entered the city of Morksey so that he wouldn't stand out, but he wasn't under the impression that he would stay unnoticed forever. He would make preparations for the business that he needed to register at the Commerce Guild, register under a false name, then buy a small, worn-out house from a real estate agent. He would then spend the next 3 months selling meat skewers or something from a cart. If he was hired by an existing company, his freedom would be limited, and with his base of operations being a cheap inn, enjoying conversations with Orbia and the others would be difficult, as would meeting with Miles, Elenora, and the rest of his companions. It would also be problematic for the inn if Murakami's group were to attack him while he was in the city. Of course, trust issues arising from the fact that he had a low social standing would be overcome forcefully with information provided by Miles and the others, and money. They had already scouted out a man who seemed like he would sell his stall, and a real estate agent that would sell Vandalyu a house. But Vandalyu, as a child with no relatives, would certainly stand out once he did these things. That was why he knew that standing out to some extent couldn't be avoided once he came to this city.
If things go smoothly, I'll only be here for tonight. In 3 months, I will have a good position in society, and either Murakami or Birken's heads, or maybe all 3.
Said Vandalyu.
I see, then how about leaving to purchase the stall now? Or will you return to Talishheim and change jobs first?
Asked Gufidgarn. Vandalyu had just reached level 100 with the Spirit Warrior job right after coming to Morksey. That was likely due to the experience points earned by the Demon King familiars in Talishheim.
I thought I'd change jobs at the Commerce Guild.
Said Vandalyu.
But before that, I want to try and see if I can communicate with the me that is in another world.
He had already briefly explained his dream to Gufidgarn and the others, including the fact that he had created a clone of himself and parted ways with it. Vandaloo had done so simply because he had thought that this might be goodbye, and the black baby would be lonely. But this news had left Gyufidgarn, the evil god of labyrinths, speechless.
Indeed, I agree that this must be looked into immediately. You have split your soul after all,
Said Gyufidgarn. Indeed, Vandaloo had split his own soul in order to create this clone Banda. He had done something that only gods were known to be able to do. But it seemed that there was nothing out of the ordinary with Vandaloo himself. His soul was the result of Rodcourt taking the broken pieces of 4 champions and forcibly joining them together. Gyufidgarn and the others suspected that this was why Vandaloo would be unaffected, even after splitting his soul to some extent.
Well, I've confirmed that my maximum mana has decreased by about 100 million on my status.
Said Vandaloo.
I hope that my clone over there has got it.
He said, closing his eyes as if meditating. He lamented the loss of his own maximum mana, which totaled about 150 million mana, including the bonus from the mana enlargement skill.
Take good care of my body, please.
He said, and then he focused his mind onto Origin. But no matter how much he focused, he could not confirm the presence of his clone in Origin. However, he felt the sensory information from his physical body fading away, and the next thing he knew, he was standing in a mountainous area.
This isn't Origin. This is the former Scylla territory in this world.
Vandaloo murmured. It was possible that a similar place existed in Origin. However, there was no mistaking this place. If Vandaloo recalled correctly, this was the place where the liberating Princess Knight Iris was fatally wounded. It was the place where he had killed the 5-headed snake Irvine. Vandaloo thought that perhaps he had focused his mind so much that he had entered a memory from his past, but then he realized that this was not the case. The view around him was different from back then. The Sword King Borkus was carrying a black greatsword on his shoulder. Next to him was the King Slayer Slager, playing with the stitches on his neck, despite the fact that he hadn't been an undead at the time. Looking past them, Vandaloo could see Iris. She had been fatally wounded back then, but she was unwounded now, standing together with resistance fighters and ghouls. Among the ghouls were Vigero, Zadyrus, and Bastia, even though they hadn't been there back then. He could even see Isla and the Black Knight Knights Order, a legion of knights who were made up of undead vampires, as well as Eleonora, Belmond, and Miles. Finally, Legion floated into view. None of them spoke a single word.
What in the world? There isn't a single spirit nearby. Everyone is a little bigger and their equipment is old. Iris is in her old human form and the air around her is clearly different.
Vandaloo was bewildered by the fact that everyone was silent and that there wasn't a single spirit to be seen.
No, I've become about 10 centimeters smaller.
He murmured, suddenly realizing that he had shrunk.
I've returned to my height from before my growth spurt, and everyone has returned to how they were then with the old equipment that they were using back then. Come to think of it, I had a similar dream a little while before, where I was in a similar state.
At that moment, the empty air ahead became distorted, and a corridor appeared. At the same time, Borkus raised his sword, and Slager leapt into the air and vanished. Isla, Eleonora, Belmond, Miles, and Legion began to move. Iris, the Resistance, and the ghouls leapt forward. 5 people appeared in the corridor, surrounded by a pale light.
100 light omnislash.
The swordsmen leading them shouted. Iris and the Resistance members were helpless, as they were cut down by the series of slashing attacks unleashed by the swordsman Hines. The female martial artist Jennifer, the shield-bearer Deliza, and the scout Edgar leaped forward to meet Vigero and the others in battle.
So this is the group after all. That head-hunting demon might be around, so don't let your guard down, Edgar.
Shouted Jennifer.
More importantly, that child is here as well. Diana, stick with me.
Said Deliza.
I'm glad we used heroic spirit descent in the corridor before we came out. Leave the head-hunting demon to me, Hines. It's good to check things first, but don't let your guard down or hesitate, Hines.
Edgar shouted to his companion behind him. The 3 of them set about disposing of the ghouls. Deliza's mace crushed the organs of Vigero, who was far weaker than the real Vigero. Jennifer's fist smashed Bastia's head to pieces. Edgar's blade pierced Zatarus's throat before she even had the chance to recite a single incantation.
I know,
Said Heinz, a pained look on his face, cutting down the surviving resistance members with a single blow. Iris's head rolled to Vandelu's feet, and he picked it up as he watched this carnage unfold. There were no horns, and its skin was white. It was certainly the human Iris.
It's a perfect imitation of the real thing.
Vandelu murmured. Blood was pouring from Iris's severed neck, and her head was still warm to the touch. But it was fake. He knew it was fake because when Iris and the others were killed by Heinz and his party, there had been no response from danger sense, death. More importantly, he could not feel the connection of his guidance or the mysterious divine protections. And even after they died, their souls were nowhere to be seen. In other words, these were soulless, lifeless, elaborate fakes. Just like the Gubamen and Turnisha that he had seen in a previous dream.
I was late to realize this, but I suppose this is the trial that Heinz and his party are taking. It's a mystery as to why I'm a part of the trial, but I am extremely unhappy at the gods that made this trial, and at Heinz and the others for taking it.
The level of the Abyss skill has increased.